Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guests today are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sasha.
Great to have you as always. And our Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello to everyone.
Great news happened. Or just
most impressive.
I'm speechless because all 100%, just think about it, 100% of Russians' best devices like Kinzhal and other stuff, I forgot its stupid name. All of them are being
This is great. This is the result of a product improved Patriot system. And
it is,
having
yes.
what it does is it foreshadows the potential success of what the U.S., along with its NATO allies, can accomplish in the post-war period in constructing a firm, globally integrated ballistic missile defense system to permanently neutralize the nuclear arsenals of Russia, China, or any other rogue nuclear state, and preserve stability in Europe for decades, if not centuries to come. There is great potential here. And the thing I'm most excited about is that not only on the Bakhmut front are the reconnaissance, what I call like a reconnaissance in force, can't be called a full-scale offensive, but the Ukrainians are showing success there in driving the Russians back, the exhausted Russians, just like a skillful boxer. And the beautiful thing is they have not even committed those re-equipped attack brigades yet, which is going to form the main punch. They're concealing the direction and intent of those brigades, and I am cautiously, prayerfully, yet determinedly optimistic about the potential results of a Ukrainian counteroffensive once it is fully unleashed.
Very well said, Jonathan. And don't forget that Ukrainians already using Storm Shadow missiles from Great Britain, and now French are going to give some other missiles by the funny name. It's funny in Russian though. But no, I forgot actually his name, but very funny. And to tell the truth, when you're thinking about F-16s, which, reading everything about their usefulness and so on, it's kind of a dicey proposition, but psychological effect would be incredible, regardless of I'm not military expert, so I cannot really say one way or another how useful they are, because on the one hand they're very powerful and many countries of especially G7s and everybody else using them in NATO specifically. However, the proper use of F-16s, first of all, you need at least 100 of those planes. Number two, you need reconnaissance flights like radars, flying radars, at least 4 of them. So if you have 4, and then you have all acting in coordination with each other. So these radars can immediately say that, say, in radius of 200 kilometers, there are some Russian planes. So F-16 can start hitting them right away without those planes even recognize what's hitting them from where. They won't even detect it. So it's a complicated military proposition. But I think that sooner or later, and hopefully sooner, Ukraine will get this F-16 flights, maybe others, but for sure F-16s will be a part of it. Because England, for example, they want to give F-16s. They don't have them. They're using different European Typhoon jet fighters. But England proposed that they're willing and ready to pay for training of Ukrainian soldiers. By the way, interestingly enough, Ivan, I don't know if you can confirm it, in England, there is a lineup of instructors to train Ukrainian soldiers because their Ukrainian soldiers are so quick and so good that these trainers they are planning to learn something from them because they have this.
Now that's a really good student who can teach his
It's-
teacher something. Yeah.
It's just incredible situation. I never heard of anything like this. Ivan, have you heard about it?
Yeah, actually, coming back to the incredible success of Ukrainian air defense this night when 19 most powerful Russian missiles were shot down over Kiev. I've seen this from my own apartments on 21st floor. I'm not a very responsible civilian. I didn't come to a shelter. I've been in my apartment. Obviously, it was too late to come to a shelter because I woke up from an explosions of anti-air defense systems, and hopefully and obviously it's thanks to the from our Western partners because we had Patriot systems, because we have NASAMS systems, because we have IRIS-T air defense systems, but it's also thanks to the talented Ukrainian soldiers, which show really significant results and smart approach using Western weapons, and a lot of Western officers and officials that Ukrainian soldiers are so talented that they're so quickly learning how to use those systems, and that they are using them in a smart way. So it's I think it's a really great synergy of Ukrainian talents and Western technologies. And after Ukraine will win in this war, I think that Western soldiers will, NATO soldiers will also have to learn a lot from Ukrainian soldiers of how they used these systems in real battle with real enemy, not in some kind of trainings and otherwise.
I think
Even more-
Ukrainians will become a great trainers and coaches for NATO soldiers.
and even more than that, they will become the main eastern bulwark of NATO's defense against any potential future aggression. Because if you link Ukraine, the Baltic states, and Finland, that forms a continuous barrier, a far eastern barrier against any potential Russian aggression, and you reinforce that barrier with both American troops and American troops manning and advising on ballistic missile defense systems, such as Patriot. Have those stationed all throughout the borders of Finland and Ukraine and the Baltic states, and you have a very powerful barrier that is very cost effective, because you're not talking about large numbers of NATO ground troops. You're talking about just the right number of ballistic missile defense and air defense troops to help form that solid line. And the rest of the Ukrainian, Finnish, and Baltic armed forces, they can form the rest of the remaining bulwark, with the rest of NATO acting as a strategic reserve and supporting and reinforcing and rebuilding Ukraine, both economically as well as militarily. And so the Ukraine's security will become much greater as soon as we can successfully conclude this war, repel the Russian presence, and reestablish a fully integrated and whole Ukraine.
Yeah, in your calculation, Jonathan, you missed one very important country. It's Poland. Why Poland is so important? Not only because whole history between Poland and Russia and so on. But right now, with the so-called leader of Belarus, Lukashenko, whoever he is, and there is apparently more and more information coming out that it could be quite lethal. Whatever I think, maybe in Moscow he's got some Novichok or some other uh, friendly stuff from Russians. So there might be some upheaval in Belarus concerning the election and so on. And I think Poland, as a neighboring country, they are not going to be just bystanders and just take a look. Oh, what's going to happen? Because pro-Russian forces in Belarus, they can try to put their own leader in Belarus, and I don't think that Poland will easily allow that to happen. Especially that the Belarus has very strong opposition, and it's unlike in Moscow, their opposition is vocal, organized, and they're getting tired of all this Lukashenko story, the Russian story, and all on. They would much rather allied with the West, with Poland, than with Russia. I think Russia is becoming slowly but surely a failed state. And Jonathan, your idea of containment is, I always admire you for keeping up this theory.
I hope, meanwhile, Belarus will really become Belarus, because now it's been a satellite state to Russia. It's Belarus. It's mostly managed by Russia and using by Russia as their military playground. So they train Russian troops here. They've getting all the stocked old Soviet weapons from Belarus, and let's remember that they've used Belarus as one of the directions of their attack to Ukraine a year ago over the Chernobyl nuclear plant zone. So, but I hope that days of Lukashenko are almost finished, and meanwhile Belarus will become a free state, independent from Russia.
One of the important things to recommend to remember here is that Belarus is their sense of national identity when compared with that of Ukraine is much weaker for whatever reason. Much weaker sense of national identity than the Ukrainians have. And in order for them, matter of fact, when the Soviet Union broke up in 1991, Belarus, found itself independent by default, not because they had physically moved to become independent, but because the former Soviet Union could no longer exert influence over it. It was standing there, and had now what Ukraine will probably have to do, along with the other NATO members, is to apply the appropriate amount of diplomatic and economic pressure to convince Belarus that their real source of security lies in allying with NATO and becoming an independent state with Ukraine by its side, not in opposition, but in cooperation. And I think that will be the most effective approach. So, and just think, Belarus becomes a member of NATO, it strengthens the eastern bulwark of air defense and containment of any future Russian aggression that much more. And it represents a great opportunity for the Belarusian people.
Ivan, would you like to show us videos that you prepared?
Yeah, I have a really great video. Unfortunately, it's not about the masterpiece of Ukrainian air defense systems. I hope I will show that one in the meantime. But it's also really great, and I think that we'll have a lot to discuss after it. So, Mark, please launch the video.
Many topics have appeared and swiftly vanished from public discourse in 2022. But Russia's war against Ukraine remains the main talking point. If you have not been closely following the war, it all may seem like a dead end for Ukraine, and that it would be better off forgetting about its territories occupied by Russia. But Ukraine has a real chance to kick out the Russians from its land and end the war once and for all. Just a year after, the world's outlook has shifted from the prediction that Kyiv would fall in a matter of days to the point where a decisive counteroffensive of Ukraine's armed forces is being discussed. And considering the successes of the past Ukrainian counteroffensives, the results of this step may also be notable. Even if this war is one of attrition, it will be a confrontation between Russia's resources and the resources of the entire democratic world.
І Росія не готова на довготривалі бойові дії.
But nobody wants to prolong the war, especially not Ukraine, which is why its government has announced a set of clear goals.
Він каже, нагніться, каже, я вам на ушко скажу. Каже, ми точно повернемося в Маріуполь? Я говорю, да. Каже, а коли? Я кажу, да, в цьому році.
The brave defense of the Ukrainian armed forces gives time for Western weapons to arrive and thousands of Ukrainian soldiers to finish their training in allied countries. Global military experts are analyzing the direction of the inevitable counteroffensive. The majority believe it will take place in the south of Ukraine. It would cut off the land corridor from the temporarily occupied Crimea to the Donbass. But it doesn't matter whether the main site of the operation will be Mariupol or Melitopol. Ukraine will liberate all its lands. But to achieve this, the West's support has to be more resolute because Ukraine's current supply of resources is less than its needs.
У нас нема таких можливостей. Витрачати уйми боєприпасів для того, щоб зруйнувати свою ж власну інфраструктуру, нам немає сенсу. Ми рахуємо кожний снаряд, кожну міну і кожне людське життя.
Unlike their Ukrainian counterparts, the occupiers' army is unmotivated. They have been dying for no reason for over a year. The goals of the so-called special operation change with every defeat. Thanks to the statements of captured Russians, there is evidence that soldiers are paying their commanders not to go on an assault because it guarantees death. The troops of the aggressor have not advanced in a long time. Commanders are fired regularly. While Russian propaganda is telling stories about how the collective West has grown tired of supporting Ukraine, a tank coalition has been formed. Estonia is sending all its howitzers, setting an example that a country guarding democratic principles and protecting its people must be given maximum military support. This war will end because Ukrainians are extremely motivated to win, but they remember the price they are paying for it every day. Negotiations at the current stage of the war make no sense. Russia is simply lying, just like it did before attacking, and giving ultimatums instead of negotiating. It has demonstrated a lack of respect for international human rights time and time again, and hoping that something has changed is not worth it. So the quicker the military support comes, the faster the war will end. And soon, all of us will finally state that Ukraine, with the help of the entire free world, has proven the superiority of democracy over dictatorship.
Yes, indeed, very, very good video, very high quality and up to the point. I think that West at first was very cautious. They were afraid that Kyiv would be overrun in a few days. And
They simply didn't know what to expect.
yeah, and because it was really a funny situation. I remember it so well. On one hand, Biden and American experts are saying that the war is imminent. The war is just about to begin. On the other hand, Ukrainians were saying, please don't scare people. We don't see any evidence of the war, and you're just scaring potential investors and so on. So this was a very, very difficult situation to analyze because either one side is not telling the truth or the other side is is not really taking a precautious means to protect themselves, or maybe they were protecting themselves as we understand it now, but they didn't want to show it to Putin their real strength and how they will react to that. And now it appears to me, especially after this night attack on Kiev with 19 missiles, and all of them, 100%, are being killed. You see, I would imagine that when a few days ago Ukrainians shot first Kinjal, but it was only one. So Russians thought that it could be a fluke, they were just lucky. And number two, if they will send a massive army of all kind of missiles, drones, and together, so Ukrainians will not be able to detect all of them, and even if detect all of them, they will not have enough firepower to deal with all shot at the same time. Well, it's 100%. It's just
Mhm.
incredible. It's
This
incredible.
Yeah, this illustrates, Sasha, what I had spoken about in a previous shows about the underlying fear of the Russian leadership. What I reemphasize this again: the one thing that Russia fears more than anything else, even though they don't say it out loud, the one thing they fear is the potential of Western technology, and specifically American technology, to neutralize the one thing that makes Russia a great power in their view: their nuclear arsenal, their missiles. If they can neutralize that, Russia is irrelevant in their own view. And
Jonathan, let me ask a question. Since
oh, let me
the
answer it.
uh, you will, I know that. But since the last time when nuclear weapons were used in Japan in 1945, there were Korean wars, Vietnam wars, Iraq, Iran, just name it. But no, Iran, sorry. But let me ask you: was there at least one instance that country which possesses nuclear weapons would win any war?
Okay, the one instance where and in my opinion, the last instance, the only instance during the Cold War where a nuclear war could have been won, albeit at heavy cost or significant cost just in terms of, was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that was when Khrushchev, in an effort to achieve de facto strategic parity with the United States, tried to forward position his nuclear missiles in Cuba. Had the United States, and it has been war gamed, had the United States gone to war against the Soviet Union at that time with a comparatively small number of ICBMs that the Soviets had at that time, yes, the United States could have, in the sense, won a nuclear war with the Soviet Union, effectively destroying the Soviet Union as a state, almost achieving a Carthaginian peace. Uh, but it would have been at the cost of several million American casualties, civilian casualties. And the American leadership at that time was simply not that Machiavellian, cold, calculating, ruthless as oh yes, it's worth it to lose several million American lives in order to destroy the Soviet Union once and for all. There were isolated voices who thought that way, but it was not the consensus of the American people. The American people, when they fight a war so they can go back home and be left alone. There is a strong isolationist streak in the American national character. That that isolationist streak disappeared or was submerged during the Cold War because the American people recognized that this was an enemy that needed to be defeated. And so they were willing to recognize it. However, once the Soviet Union collapsed and you no longer had this overarching threat threatening the peace of the West, then the isolationist streak in the American character came to the forefront once again. You have strong and credible voices within the American electorate who say, okay, we do not need to become extensively involved in other nations' affairs. And there is an opposite viewpoint that says, yes, we still need to be involved. So there is this competing dynamic that you have to be aware of in the American political body. An isolationist tendency is not unusual. It has always been there. It was temporarily submerged during the Cold War. And now again, with this Russian-Ukrainian war, is that, okay, yeah, we have to make sure that Ukraine is free, and we have to make sure that the NATO alliance is strong, but there is still always going to be this mote of caution in the American thinking that says we cannot afford to become overcommitted. Otherwise, we will become very much like the defunct Roman Empire, an empire that has exhausted its resources.
But Jonathan, is there a risk that if the West and the United States are not overcommitted, and or maybe even very little committed to worst-case scenario, then Russia may become successful in its war in Ukraine? And what are the consequences for the United States and the West in this case? What's your opinion?
Russia, there is an increasing recognition among American and Western political circles that Russia cannot be allowed or perceived to have attained any kind of success in its war in Ukraine. The trick is, it's a tricky political balancing act. You must defeat Russia, you must drive them out, and you must restore the status quo before the war, and do so without excessively overcommitting yourself or over-escalating. And it's a very it's a very tricky balancing act.
And you know what?
There's nothing easy. There's nothing easy or obvious about it.
Also, a very interesting thing that there is a rift between position of United States that you cannot touch Russian territory, you have to expel Russian troops, but absolutely no use of Western weapons in Russian territory. And English, on the other hand, providing Storm Shadow, they assured Ukrainians they can use them anywhere as and when they are pleased. So that's very serious rift, because if Ukraine, and they need to use Russian territory to free Ukrainian territory, because they have to encircle Luhansk and Donetsk regions, and by encircling it, all the people who are in this epicenter, they are doomed to die slowly or very fast death by throwing themselves on Ukrainian the meat grinder, one way or another. That's the reality of it. So what Americans are going to do if Ukrainians will use Storm Shadow and other devices and go to, apparently Russia is defenseless. Apparently the Russians are much stronger in Ukraine as we speak than inside Russia. The Bryansk, Voronezh, Belgorod, Rostov, all the cities, they're defenseless. You can go take I don't know, probably 100 people with machine guns. They will take over all the cities.
It does not surprise me that Great Britain and the other Western allies are taking a different approach, because NATO, it's a very strong alliance. It is not monolithic in its outlook. And just as during the Second World War, Great Britain had different ideas on how to defeat Nazi Germany than did the United States. Remember, the United States wanted...
And the United States... we lost Sasha. But I want to add that United States tried to stay neutral almost until the end of the Second World War. Given just
they tried to stay neutral until about 1941, they tried.
Economy and the military support, and then they disappeared to the alliance of Japan and Germany to strengthen, and after that Pearl Harbor happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
There is a really great argument to those who said that the United States should take from Europe not to support Ukraine and other countries to the Asian is that after without the support, Ukraine will fall. And after Ukraine will fall, probably other countries in Western Europe will fall. And the union of Russia and China will strengthen. And then China will come to United States, like Japan did during Second World War in Pearl Harbor. So now United States have a chance and opportunity to kill Chinese ally while it's weakened. And
Correct.
And it's I think it's
makes perfect
really
sense. Stop them now.
Important reason to give Ukraine all required resources, to give ATACMS missiles, to give F-16, and to allow to finish Russia when it's weakened and have nothing to show against it. Even their Wunderwaffe, so-called hypersonic Kinjal missiles, which they used to blackmail the Western politicians that, okay, we will not use nuclear weapons, but we can use Kinjal missiles to destroy your parliaments, to destroy your HQs. They've proven useless against the Patriot missile defense systems. So Russia has nothing to no
they
more.
Have successfully, they've successfully taken away Russia's leverage.
Yeah.
And that is the important thing. And so the United States will end up kind of following in the wake of its Western allies in supplying the additional weapons that Ukraine needs, because the Ukrainians have already shown, hey, if you won't give us the deep attack means, we'll improvise. We will improvise, and we'll find a way to attack those deep Russian formations and hold them at risk. So I would say the fact that America, that the United States has shown itself to be something of a reluctant ally, although it's still supplying quite a great deal, it's not going to matter in the long run, because the Ukrainians will continue to exceed expectations, continue to make the absolute most of whatever resources they are given, and will ultimately, in my view, be successful in driving out the Russians and reestablishing the stability of Europe, in spite of U.S. seeming reluctance to go all out in support of Ukraine. So, in that sense, I'm not overly concerned about the isolationist pull of some political forces within the United States. Ultimately, the United States is being forced to recognize that its own best self-interest relies in the vigorous defense of a free and independent Ukraine.
Excellent. Well, we had a great news today. Congratulations to all our listeners. And with that, I would like to thank you very, very much for today's program, and looking forward to have even better news on Friday. Thank you, and see you on Friday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.